Well, let's go ahead and get started. I know we're going to, even though it's Black History Month, we want to definitely make sure we're not kind of abiding by CPT. We want to get started really on time here. So sorry, you guys. Instead of football, it's all good. Thanks everybody for joining. Really excited about talking and again kicking off Black History Month, or at least the early stage of Black History Month, with a really incredible group of individuals, a really incredible panel. 5 ways to empower Black employees at your company. It's actually interesting, a very, very timely conversation. I think a lot of people would like to think that this type of session isn't necessary. And then you get hit with this lawsuit by one of the few remaining Black coaches at the NFL, and you realize that there is no safe space, and definitely not in corporate America. And if the visibility of the NFL doesn't preclude people from making sure that Black employees are empowered, just imagine what happens, in typical boardrooms across America. So I think this is, again, a very, very timely conversation. Thank you for all voices for giving us a platform. Again, my name is Primus. I'm the CEO of Valence, and really excited to be joined by a really incredible group of people that I've had the occasion to know over the past several weeks, months, and years. And so really excited to introduce everyone. Valence, our mission is to create new paths to success for Black professionals. And when we started a couple of years ago, we created a really incredible database and recently have focused on employee development. And one of the paths that we're developing for our employees is led by Tracy Williams. And so Tracy, I want you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're here.
Thanks so much, Guy. So I'm Tracy Reneé Williams. I currently serve as Vice President of Learning and Development and Head of Bonds for Valence. And I'm here because I believe solely in the mission of what we're doing with Valence and with all of our partners. And we've been fortunate enough to partner with some incredible organizations over the past 18 months as we embark on this mission of creating new paths to success for Black professionals. I'm dedicated to the professional development and growth of individuals, specifically those in the community I identify with. So I'm excited to be here, excited to be with this incredible group of women who are going to embark on this discussion with us. Thanks.
Yep. So Kelah, why don't you jump in?
Absolutely. Kelah Raymond here. My pronouns are she and her. And I serve as a people leader within organizations. When I'm not supported and internally in an organization, I act as a consultant relative to everything connected to people ops and being the right hand really to people leaders and operationalizing, the pieces of this DE&I and B effort that so many are interested in. And so I'm super excited to have this conversation, because I like to talk about how to take it to the fire in the front lines and make sure that all of our aspirational goals and all of the things we're posting on LinkedIn as an organization is really happening where it counts. Super happy to be here.
Great. Well, glad you're here. Constance, good to see you.
Hey. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Constance Wilson. I am the Director of Belonging, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, which is a mouthful. So Betty is what we call it at Udemy. And I am mostly excited to have this conversation today because it's an important one. Guy, to your point about there being no safety, I just want to take a moment and recognize the fact that for all of you who do not know, HBCUs across the country were receiving bomb threats. So about that safe space, like this is why conversations like this are needed, because there are some folks, again, that don't feel like this conversation is needed. It's not that big of a deal, and it actually is. So I'm very happy to represent and show up and have this important discussion. So thank you for having me.
No, that's a great point. And actually, I think a lot of people not only think this conversation isn't needed, they rather the conversation not happen, right?
That
so
part.
A very good point. And Renita, the kind of owner and winner of Background of the Year. It's still early, but I'm crowning it. I'm calling it right now.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you, Guy. I've been in management consulting for 20 years. Started off at the Big Four, and so I have been in and out of the rooms of the Fortune 50s, the 100s, the 500s, and having been on the ground as sometimes the only in the room or in the company or amongst the few, I have both been a part of these conversations, have been on the receiving end of the outcomes when the conversations did and didn't happen. I'm now, as a Black executive, still in the rooms, knowing that, to your point, Guy, these conversations still need to keep happening because there is still a need that's here. And I also have the pleasure of serving as an executive coach for the Valence Bonds program too. And so being able to talk with several Black professionals and mentor them, there are still a lot of issues and ways we can support Black talent. So very excited to have this conversation today.
Great. Well, I didn't use my pronouns earlier, so it's he and him. So I apologize for that. You can see all the gray hair. So I'm just getting trying to learn some new tricks here. Let's start off. Actually, Renita, you talked about it, but I think one of the really important things that we should just get started with is what is it that you guys are doing in your organizations to offer this support that Black professionals I think would like to have, but honestly need. So I'm going to kick it right back to you, Renita, and love to get your thoughts.
Yes, so currently I serve as a principal for Thought Ensemble, a Paraveda company. We just merged with Paraveda in December. But some of the things that we're doing for Black talent in particular, there is what's called a Black Fins group. So it is just a group for the Black employees at Paraveda. In addition, offering this coaching and mentoring support for executives and also just members of the team in general. So knowing that there are avenues that we can go to get executive coaching that sometimes is only reserved for your VPs and C-suite. That coaching is also needed for your emerging professionals and middle managers and directors, because a lot of times there are things that you need development on that you might not have access to in your organization. So getting that early, so you have some of the keys to the kingdom before you need them, and you can be prepared to step into those leadership positions. So that's one of those central things, being able to offer those coaching services for Black professionals in our organizations, one of those central ways of supporting. And then being able to just ask the question, what do you need support-wise? So being invited to that conversation versus, actions created out the blue. It's like, well, that's great, but I didn't need that in particular. Like, just ask me, I'll tell. And so that's one of the biggest ways that we're offering support for our Black talent.
Okay, great. And I'm going to go to Constance next, but I want to come back to this question, this what do you need question, because I'm wondering if people know what they need a lot of times, but we'll cover that a little bit later.
Very great. It's an excellent question. The way that we've started to support our Black colleagues, in addition to what Renita was talking about, is also creating that space, right? So our Black ERG, employee resource groups, we have a employee resource group, and it's BEN, so it's a Black employee network, and it's about that space, providing a space for those who identify as Black individuals to come and be able to have community and share stories and share a sense of success, share a sense of support, what's needed to be able to collectively say, okay, Udemy, we've come together, this is where we are, this is what we need. So Renita, I couldn't agree with you more. Asking the question is it sounds simplistic and it's almost like Captain Obvious thing, but it's not. Like, really ask the questions about what I need. Don't assume, because if you assume, how the saying goes, I'm not going to finish that, but making assumptions is not the best way to go. So asking the question, listen, take notes. And then aside from that, also being prepared to commit to the action, right? Don't just take notes and listen to me and then, turn around and continue as, with status quo, but actually take notes and hear what I'm saying and then commit to action based on what I've told you. That's how you actually provide that support. And then it goes into psychological safety as well. Great.
So Tracy, I'm going to come to you last, just because I don't want to be accused of playing favorites, and then we'll try to engage. I don't want everyone to necessarily have to answer every question, but I think this first one is foundational. So Kelah, I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yes, and I'm going to speak to, because I'm currently not attached to an organization, I'm going to speak practically, to those that are tuned in and listening. And I think one of the best ways that you can create a meaningful space or support or empower, and just so we're speaking from the same language, empower is to give power, right? To give authority, right? Back to your Black team members. And again, this can go across your entire organization, but I would say start strong, finish strong. So really, I like to challenge organizations, leaders, what does your career page look like, right? So when candidates or people are on the market and looking at you, what do they see? Can they see someone that looks like them? What does your company photo look like, right? That seems so minute, but it's so major to a Black employee. I remember the reason I joined my last organization is because I said, oh my God, their company photo looks like heaven, right? And my definition of heaven is various hues. And I saw tattoos, I saw piercings. What I saw it seemed like everyone in that organization looked like they can just be authentically themselves. Now, while I saw Black people and I saw Black people in leadership, because I sleuthed through their LinkedIn, right? I still saw, because I saw tattoos and piercing, I was like, this seems like an organization that allows people to be people. And their first value just happened to be see people as people. So practically speaking, it's like, how do you start? Like, how are you welcoming in talent or diverse talent into your organization, and what does that look like? Beyond the careers page, I'd say your blogs. Are they visible to the public? And if you have an employee resource group, are they all speaking? Are they writing on the blog? Like, how can a person really get a sense of what it would feel like to belong in your organization? And I'll pass that on over to Tracy at this point.
You bring up something so interesting, Kelah, and how we always talk about this phrase, representation matters. And it is so true. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to client websites or company pages to see what does that representation look like, and what does it look like at the highest levels of your organization, not just within your middle management or your early career folks too, because that representation is needed at all ranks throughout the organization in order for that sense of belonging to begin to develop for employees. When we think about what proactive support, through ERGs, through representation, et cetera, all of that is so important. Then I also look at truly, what are you doing when boots hit the ground? What are some of the actions you're taking for your Black employees and other employees, but specifically your Black employees right now, that really shows them that you are dedicated to their development and growth, you're dedicated to their success within your organization. And Guy has heard me say this before, I don't like working with companies that are check the box companies. Like, oh, we did this one thing and now we've done our duty with our employees. No, you have to continue to show and continue to provide that level of support. So for example, if you are going to quote unquote invest in their development, don't just check the box and invest in a workshop or a training. What do you do when they come back, and is it fertile ground for them to actually demonstrate what they've learned, and is it fertile ground for them to continue to grow within your organization as well? That's truly what proactive support looks like. It's not just a one and done. It's what are you doing to work with your employees on their professional journey, on their journey of leadership, that shows that you are invested in the long term, not just the here and now.
Right. So I have a toss-up question then. Again, if you have a inclination to respond, please jump in. So this check the box company, right? I would hazard to guess that the majority of companies in America are still check the box companies, right? I think there's a lot of people are making inroads, but if you are a check the box company, right? And maybe you don't feel that way, but you want to make sure you're not. What is like a logical kind of first step beyond just doing the bare minimum and just kind of paying lip service? What is it that we could do first to kind of just get the party started?
I would love to jump in on this one, kind of continuing the last conversation on the website. Yes, we do scroll the websites and see who's there. But with that, don't fake the funk. Don't get a bunch of stock photos just to represent diversity if there's not diversity actually there. I would much rather you say, we know that there is an issue and we're trying to fix it. Like, be honest about where you are. And I think that is a great first step to make. It is like acknowledging that, we can do better in this versus like, oh, we got this covered, we got this plan, we got that. It's like, well, how is it developing? And if you're still at that beginning phase of your journey with equity and diversity, inclusion, and belonging, also say that. It's okay to say, it's been on the back burner for the past few years. We're bringing it more into our awareness. That's a conversation that many people are welcome to have versus pretending that you have it all together. And so I think that's a great first step.
Renita, I couldn't agree with that more. The representation piece, as we were speaking about it, I was like, because there's definitely a difference between representation and marketing. don't market to me, because if I come into that company and I see what the population is and it's not matching up with what I saw on the website, I'm likely not staying there long. So that's one. And then two would be just making sure that when you're having conversations, it goes back to that commitment and that actionable part, right? What actions are you actually taking to make sure that you're doing the work and you're not just checking the box? And I think that there's a fear, human nature, there's a fear of incompetence that comes up. And there has been multiple studies done. I think it starts around the age 12. And so you hear younger folks saying that, oh, I got it, I know it. And it's not because they truly know it, it's because they're afraid. There's a vulnerability that happens when you admit to not knowing something. And so I know we have some leaders in the audience. There's the leaders that need to understand it's okay. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to, say something that you didn't mean. It doesn't make you a racist. It means that you were ignorant, right? And that's okay too. It just means how you correct yourself, how you move forward past that, whatever that was, how you move forward beyond that. So I think I couldn't agree with Renita more. There's the representation, there's the taking this first step, committing to action, and then knowing that this is a moving target. Diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, it is a moving target. Terms are changing every day, actions and things like that. Laws are changing every day, right? It's hard to keep up. So just be gracious with yourself while getting the work done and committing to action.
I love that. There's something that I want to share, and then I'm definitely interested in the panelists' perspective on it. A tidbit that I want to say to everyone listening that has tuned into the webinar is that Black people tend to be very direct communicators. And, so to market to us and then we get something differently, or, just to say to us, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. Like, to us, that is power, right? And you're empowering me, or you're inviting me in to share, should I want to share it? Or you can invite me, once you say you don't know, you can invite me to give feedback or share a thing. But we tend to be direct communicators. And when we hear a thing, I'm seeing it on LinkedIn, of course, it's Black History Month. And it's like, if you don't see it if you're not doing it throughout the year, we don't want to hear from you this month, right? And that's because it's about the performance behind it. And so just as we were talking about representation and the marketing piece to it, I'll say most of your Black employees want you to be direct. We want you to be honest. We want you to be transparent. We want to hear what you really think, because we're adults and we know how to handle ourselves thereafter. So I'll pause there, just definitely to get a sense from the panelists, if you all would, agree as an organization, which, an organization is just simply an organism, but as the organization is speaking or attempting to empower us, I think that's the major thing that most of us so desperately want and we seek. I'll pause for a response.
Yeah, I think what you're speaking to, Kelah, is this opportunity for authenticity, both at the individual level and the organization's level. And that's something that I believe all of us are still in the process of learning. I know we've, as a panel, discussed this process of unlearning that we're all going through. And Constance, you talk about it so beautifully, and what that feels like for us as individuals and as an organization. And so we need to recognize that it's a process to get to that level of authenticity in our communication, and authenticity and intentionality in our actions. And when we think about not being a check the box organization, I just challenge any of the leaders or anyone on this call to think about what do authentic actions look like, not performative actions. You can do a survey all day, but if you let those survey results sit and you ghost your employees after you've asked them to give you feedback, that's not the way to go. It's not the way to go. So you really want to ensure that if you're going to engage in any of those actions to gather the feedback, that you're actually ready to, as Constance said, to take the action. So even the initial actions that you take, address and assess whether or not they are authentic in nature, and that if you're actually ready to be intentional about the actions that are coming after. That is how you become an organization that's not just check the box.
Yeah, go ahead.
And just to follow up on that, Kelah and Tracy, great points there on that direct communication and asking for feedback. The next part of that is very important. So once we provide the feedback, if it's an immediate defensiveness, well, it's not like that, or you're looking at it wrong, or maybe if you look at it this way, well, hold on, it's my experience that I'm presenting. But if it's immediately met with you're looking at it the wrong way, that shuts down communication and sends a very large message that, well, you're asking for the feedback, but it's not really welcomed here. So just make sure that you're and it's okay to have conscious dialogue there of like, well, perhaps look at it this way, or what do you think about this? But if it's immediate defensiveness, just make sure you're checking the other side of that conversation too.
Yep, so I'm going to put on my consulting hat, Renita. I've had it off for about 20 years. I'm going to put it back on right now. So when you guys are talking, I hear like two distinct steps. One is collecting the feedback, right? And then there's kind of listening to and acting on the feedback. So maybe that's 3 steps. But let's kind of address that that first step here, right? Because I remember, there was an ombuds person, right? And you could trust that person or you couldn't, right? Just to be honest, I think hopefully they were trustworthy, and I think the intention was for them to be trustworthy. But I think, and again, us partnering with All Voices to do this, them being an employee feedback management platform that really kind of it solves that problem, right? Because the feedback is anonymous, and just making sure that you're getting true, honest, and open feedback is critical. How do you guys see using that feedback once you get it, right? You talk about kind of making sure you listen to it, but is there a process by which you would go through to make sure that again, you're staying engaged but staying true to kind of your direction and your North Star?
I can jump in. I'd say the short answer is yes. It's all about the feedback loop and the communication loop. I think most of us would declare and say, don't ask me for feedback if you're not going to use it or do something with it. So especially like a platform like All Voices, if you're an HR leader listening to this webinar, we have engagement surveys, right? We're always asking employees for feedback. You may send another survey about something more specific. And it's about helping employees know, or team members know, that you're connecting the dots, right? When X program comes out, or when it's time for performance reviews, or when we're doing succession, talent management, right? When we have a new role that comes up, like just all of these things that, kind of dovetail off of the people, out of the people function, helping team members know why you're doing A or B or C. And I think it's more powerful, not I think, I know from almost my 2 decades, it's more powerful when you let employees know, like, hey, we're doing X, or we plan to do this, we plan to beta it to see if you want it, do you really want it, what it needs to look like, because of this survey, because of feedback we receive from our All Voices platform, because of feedback we receive from the employee engagement survey. I think most team members, Black employees, don't feel psychologically safe or don't provide feedback because they don't know how it's being used, or it's being used against them. If I can go more to a tactical component of the Black employee experience, or being in the workplace, not just predicated to Black people, is connecting with the leader or a manager, and they're just shut down right there. And their voice doesn't get brought anywhere higher, right, in the organization, or their perspective isn't, cascaded up or taken up. I'll pause there to see who else has thoughts or reflections on that.
There's some really great questions in the chat too that I want to get to as a part 2 of this question.
And just another piece there on that feedback is, it goes back to, again, just being very clear and honest with where you are. It's like, hey, we received this piece of feedback, or we saw this in the survey results, and we're curious to know more. We're hosting an open forum to discuss it. Thought Ensemble has done this extraordinarily well, both with great feedback and also with feedback that's kind of like, oh, but it's like, hey, we are honest. This is where we are, but let's bring folks in to talk about it. Because again, if you can see a survey result and then you just start creating actions out the blue, do you really understand like the heart of the comment and the heart of the data without hearing from your people? And that's just not for Black talent. That's across the board in an organization. Have the conversations, and as Constance said, don't assume the action, but bring people in to talk. And it may take a little bit to warm them up, so they can, you have to prove some trust in there, but don't give up on the conversation.
I think another tactic that would be great, especially if it's like cringeworthy feedback, is bring someone up from outside in, right? Who can facilitate that dialogue. That way, as leadership, you're just sitting and listening, or you're nowhere in the picture, right? Really giving team members a safe place to share. So like I always coach leaders to like seek to understand your why. And if like you're not ready to hear it, remove yourself from it, but still take action on it so that you can get the appropriate the appropriate feedback.
I just got some really good feedback myself, so I'm gonna try to implement that going forward, friends.
I wanted to add to that. So being a part, I identify as a Black woman, there's that, right? When you're giving this feedback, especially from the sense of, okay, so let's say something happened to me. I was discriminated against, I've experienced sexism, whatever that looks like. What I have found in my professional experience is that member of traditionally or systemically marginalized communities tend not to go to HR. And I work in HR. So let's just clear that up, right? I am a part of the HR team, part of the people team at Udemy. And so what typically tends to happen is that someone from the Black community or a systemically marginalized community has experienced something. The community itself and the organization is typically small. So the rumor, not even the rumor mill, the circles start, right? And people start sharing stories. And because that community is already so small, the step of following the process, which would be to, go speak to your human resource business partner or, go file a formal complaint, typically doesn't happen. And instead that action goes to me leading the company to go find a company that's more psychologically safe, because I don't feel like I'm being catered to here or valued here. Whatever happened to me wasn't appreciated or even resolved. And instead I was met with a gaslight, right? Which is typically what tends to happen, or traditionally what has happened. So I wanted to call that out as well, understanding that, there's a whole system in place for feedback loops that might not be taken advantage of, but then you have companies like All Voices that make that available, right? And so you have that anonymity and the ability to go and express what happened and have a better chance of getting it met and resolved.
I love that, Constance, because that's what we see, right? And one of the missteps that can happen is when you do try to address feedback in a vacuum and you don't seek objective understanding of it. And one of the best processes that I've ever been a part of is to be able to take leaders through a feedback process where they're not alone in that feedback process. They have somebody objective walking with them who is gathering the feedback and helping them synthesize the feedback and then coming up with, here's how you respond. Whenever I've taken leaders through that, guarantee first level response is, well, that doesn't happen. There's defensiveness, there's this, there's that. That's not me. Well, there's some truth to this because it has come out in the feedback that I've gathered. So having someone who is right there with you to help you analyze that in an objective way and help you formulate the right responses that can help move the needle in the actions that you want to take. That's one action that I will always say is absolutely needed. We can't do this by ourselves. All of us as leaders have been on the receiving end of feedback that we did not like. And we need somebody who can work with us to help us understand that and take action on it. And no one can do that. No one can do that in a vacuum, whether individually or organizationally.
So it almost feels, Tracy, that you're advising that once you get the feedback, it's important to have the process be inclusive, right? So you're not just going into, the office and, like you said, just coming out and coming up with a solution without the people that have raised the issue specifically, right? And again, if you have an anonymous survey, you don't know who that is specifically, right, but having representation, I think, really, really matters and is important.
Absolutely. Who better to work with and collaborate with than people from those teams and departments and other organizations within your company who have provided the feedback? Why would you do that? Why would you want to create action items for that particular group without having them a part of those conversations? I think too often we try to dictate what's going to happen versus collaborate with the people who are going to be on the receiving end of whatever actions you want to implement within your organization.
Great point. So let's kind of get to the second part of that kind of question, right? So you've collected the feedback and you have something. What is it that you do to ensure again, I think that a rising tide lifts all boats. I think we agree with that. And I think there's this notion that this is, I think someone said yesterday, it's a zero-sum game, right? For someone to win, someone else has to lose. So team, what is it that you guys, excuse me, what is it that you, I corrected myself and then I went right back to
Good
the
job. Good
old
job.
thing. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry, everyone. Old habits die hard. Old habits die hard. What is it, team, that you would recommend once you get that feedback in order to move forward and develop a plan of action? How do you, what are some tangible things that you can do for your Black employees to make sure that they're represented and feel heard and feel included, I guess, using the operative word of the moment?
Guy, I'd be happy to respond to that. If I can, just take space. I see comments, and then I saw a +1 from someone else's comment. So I want to make sure that we're satisfying some needs. I see Jesse asked us, as a people leader, how do you help build that trust between people team? Jesse, I'm assuming you mean the HR team, as in the people team, and traditionally marginalized communities. And because I saw a +1, I was like, okay, we should address this before we keep going. She got a few, Jesse got a few amens. Yes, the HR team. I'm happy to answer that, being, in an HR role. But before I do that, do any of my my friends here have some immediate thoughts on that?
I'd love to hear your thoughts, honestly, because it feels like you have a really full grasp of the situation.
Yes. So, I will say, like, HR has a horrible brand. We do. Trust is very low, right? Across multiple organizations, trust is low. I'm going to speak. I love Constance's phrase, so I identify as a Black woman. And I'm going to speak as a Black woman in HR. And the way that I do it, I can only tell you practically, right? The way that I do it is I build amazing relationships with everyone who doesn't look like me on my HR team, so that I've earned the right to speak candidly. So I've earned the right to step into their ER investigations that I have purview over and say, hey, this was a matter between white female, Black female, and I want to give you additional context, right? What you think or what you're ready to do and how you're ready to resolve this investigation. Black female had no context. This is a real example, but I'm making it anonymous. Black female had no knowledge of all these things. The language Black female used, she said, is this still a thing, in a Slack channel about the woman-led ERG group. I said, as a Black woman, I read that, are we still doing this? That's slang in our community. That was not intended to be unprofessional. That was not intended, to throw someone under the bus. I said, I think there's a cultural language happening here. And let me give this context before we are ready to give this person feedback and before this is attached to this person's personality. And then what happens there in the HR world is successioning shifts, because when we're at the table talking about talent management and who's up next, people remember those moments, right? They remember those things, and it impacts pay. I can go on and on and on. So, practically speaking, the best way to do it is to humble ourselves as HR leaders. I'm saying this as a Black woman when it comes to my Asian teammates, okay? I don't know their lived experiences. So when I have an investigation, I check myself often, and I go to one of my Asian HR besties. If I can get, Vietnamese versus, Korean, right? If I can reach out to one of them specifically, right? I do, so that I can have more knowledge and I'm making informed decisions. So I really just think it's about humility. I think it's in HR, us challenging ourselves to say that we don't have all the answers. Historically, we build programs and products and policies in a bubble. And I think Tracy, Constance, right, Renita, all have spoken to getting feedback. And then, of course, we already said this too. It's about, if we don't know, say we don't know, right? And go to that community, whatever community it is, and say, we need your input, we need help. The last thing I'll say about that is, how diverse is your HR team? You heard me say at the top of it, I build relationships so that I can earn the right to share the hard, to have the hard conversations, and so that it's not volatile, right? But it's productive. So if your HR team is not diverse, I would definitely say start there. I know we got a lot of wins on my HR team because we were diverse, and because, if their HR partner was white and they didn't feel comfortable. Actually, I had a leader, I'll share this and then I'll pause. I had a leader who came to me and say, hey, my HR business partner is white, but I heard her guidance. I don't think her guidance will help me because it was a Black female that they were ready to give feedback on and tell her she needs to be more professional. And as a Black woman, I said, "Ooh, let's not say that. Let me coach you. Let me help you, right? Let's speak to behaviors. What behaviors are not professional, right?" So I said a lot, but really it's, humbling ourselves, how diverse we are, and reaching out to other people who don't look like you as you are making decisions and influencing leaders when it comes to other communities. As we're talking about Black communities, I'll say here specifically to the Black community.
And so Renita, in your practice, you see a bunch of companies, right? So I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Yes, and so I wanted to really address, you were talking about kind of the next step after the feedback, and I saw also a question in the chat too, like, how do you not come off as defensive? As a consultant, you might hear negative things or see since there's a problem, instead of saying, "Oh no, that's not a problem," let's walk through the steps that we went through. I think sometimes we might say blanket statements like, "Well, we don't hire enough Black talent." Okay, doesn't mean that our whole recruiting process is wrong. Let's actually take some time to deep dive and discuss and break down. So maybe it's actually these 2 steps are the ones that are knocking people out, and let's tweak this. And so being curious about the feedback and being able to say, all right, that's interesting. What part of this in particular do we need to explore more? That's a way of not coming off as being defensive. Another piece of this too, of it not being a zero-sum game, is one of my favorite phrases there, is that sometimes when corporations hear, "Oh, this is just for our Black professionals," well, what's going to happen with women or Asian community or Hispanic community or whatever else? And it's like, well, first of all, know that even as a Black professional, I have multiple facets of me. I'm Black, I'm a woman, I'm queer, I don't have any children, I am 40. And so all these identities are showing up at the table. And so if you, for example, provide me coaching, you're lifting up all my identities. So every other facet of me is also benefiting. And the same way, if you are putting in policies that help support your Black professionals, most likely 9 times out of 10, it's also going to support women. It's also going to support your other marginalized communities in your company. So automatically saying, well, there's just a few people, other folks are going to, not feel included or revolt. That's the story that we're telling ourselves. And the reality is actually quite different. So just being open to not shutting it down, but also seeing the ways they can benefit everyone else. That's one of those key things, Guy, just being able to open up the blinders a bit, just to know that if you help one group, most likely everyone's going to benefit.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to, go ahead, Constance.
Because I have something to say real quick. A couple of points. That word professional, and thank you so much, Renita, for speaking to that, because every time I hear it, like my heart palpitates. The word professional itself is centering supremacy. Let's call it that. We need to challenge our sense of normalcy and start asking questions. When I say professional, what was the standard for that? Okay, most of the leaders in corporate America, I just want to be real about it. Most of the leaders, executives in corporate America right now are white men. Like, let's be clear. This is not, trying to make anyone uncomfortable. It's not about this. This is just simply facts, right? So from a factual standpoint, if most of the leaders are white men, the word professional then equates to white men and whatever that looks like, right? So let's just go ahead and unlearn some of the things, unlearn that and question whatever you think normal is. Question that and ask yourself why you think it's normal, and then start the unlearning process. So there's that. Intersectionality as well. Couldn't agree more, Renita. There are multiple identities, and I'm so glad that you went through and named all of them. And there was also, going back to the question about showing up and what to do after the feedback, analysis. There has to be an analysis, like you were saying, about what this looks like. Okay, you've gotten the feedback. Decenter yourself. I've gotten feedback myself. Constance, you're too loud. You're aggressive. Hold on now. Wait a minute. And then we get into those conversations, right? And then there's, the microaggressions and the gaslighting and things of that nature. But it's really taking a minute to decenter yourself and try to find the objectivity in whatever the feedback was. If there's none there, cool. Move along with it and go to the next step.
I just want to jump in, and I'm going to use a comment that we got from one of our members after a session. It's like, just pass the collection plate to everybody on the call, because y'all are preaching. One thing I want to go back to, one of the questions that was in the chat in terms of this idea of building trust. And I'm going to state it plainly, and then I will explain. sometimes we have to shut up. Sometimes we just have to be quiet and listen. I know that seems simple, but too often we don't actively engage in listening. We ask the question and then we're trying to come up with our response. Just sit back, listen, seek to understand. Scaling trust is about getting to know the other person and getting to know them in a way that is a little bit more personal and intimate. And the only way you can do that is if you take the opportunity to sit back and truly hear what they have to say. So it may mean that you spend 90% of a conversation with one of your Black employees being quiet, asking follow-up questions, really digging deep so that you can have a better understanding of what their lived experience is. Because if you are not from that community, if you don't identify as a Black employee or as a woman, if you don't identify as queer, if you don't identify with any other identity that's not your own, you don't know what that lived experience is like. So you have to pay attention to the person who has that lived experience, and do your best to not invalidate that lived experience because you haven't had it yourself. So when we talk about scaling trust is, first of all, asking the right questions, seeking to understand even further, and then ensuring that you don't do anything that makes that person walk away feeling like they have not been validated in sharing what their truth is.
That's fantastic.
And Guy, sorry, I need to get this one little piece in here. It cannot be understated. Sometimes the emotional labor and the cost and what it takes to sit in a chair across from another leader and share your feedback and share your lived experience and what you see are issues in an organization. We have traditionally, in my experience, been taught, go to work, hush, that's not a place to make friends, keep your head down and be quiet and don't cause any ripples in the water. So when you are inviting your Black talent into conversations, know that sometimes I've had prep calls with my girlfriends, I've had prep calls with my coaches just to get up enough emotional energy and courage to even sit in that seat. And then there's a whole nother level of courage to say what I gotta say. And then I gotta trust you that this doesn't come back on a performance review. So just understand that there's a lot behind someone sitting in that chair that they probably had to get themselves up to the courage to do. And with them even engaging in a conversation is a huge step. I have the conversation with people that I coach. Folks are afraid to take vacation. Folks are afraid to rest. Folks are just overwhelmed and taking on more assignments because they have to show up. So check on your employees as well. If you see that, Kelah, oh, she can handle everything we give her and throw at her, she don't miss a beat. No, go check on her. She probably is
honestly,
overworked.
Renita, I'm exhausted listening to you. Honestly, just kind of knowing what that conversation is like, because we've all been there. So I appreciate that, and you kind of taking me back, because that is not a really great place to be, truthfully.
If I can dovetail off of both of those pieces, my HR hat is on, definitely, right? Like what Renita just shared is so true. Like, I think there's so many, like amens, for lack of better words, coming through the chat, and I know we all can resonate. And then, Guy just shared, like, oh man, I'm exhausted just listening to that, because it's most likely his lived experience. But then there also could be an exhaustion from a leadership perspective, to Renita's point of the emotional labor it takes that employee to share. Now, we may have mostly HR leaders here. If you're a people leader, HR leader, but if you're in a leadership level role, just sitting and hearing that, and you may be exhausted to hear it, but think about the lived experience of the person, right? And I just want to take a moment as an HR professional to empower all of you who are leaders to do exactly what Renita, I believe it was Renita, as well as Tracy, kind of just shared. You don't have to have the answers. As a matter of fact, in moments like that, it's best not to have any answers. It's best to take it, to write it out, to listen, and then go do what Renita just said too, and go talk to your HR business partner, go talk to another HR leader, go talk to another leader outside of the organization. to give you a totally different perspective. Talk to your partner, whomever else, to just get some other lenses and some other perspectives and come back to that team member and say, I've been thinking, I've been sitting, this is sat with me. And lead with your heart first, not your head. Because for a person to unpack all those emotions, and you have to understand, like, that person may be talking about an incident that happened last week, but guess what? The last 10, 15, 5, 20, however many years they've been in the workplace has all showed up in that moment, right? So lead with your heart and go, I heard what you said. And if it's hard, if your EQ is not as high and you don't have that much heart, find the one thing that made you go like, oh, and lead with that thing. And then open up dialogue and say, this is what I know, this is what I don't know. What I don't know, help me to understand. One of the other panelists, forgive me, I can't remember exactly which one of you ladies said it. Stay curious. You will empower us as a Black community sitting in that seat more with the questions you will ask us than the statements you will make, and trying to solve it and have the answers for us.
This is a great conversation. It makes me think, we did a study, Valence just released some results from a study that we did with Russell Reynolds Associates, so one of the big 5 executive recruiting firms. And one of the findings was that we really don't even know the game, right? It was, I think we all knew that, but data suggests that while 78% of non-white employees know that you need to know the hiring manager or someone who has an insight into the job, only 56% of Black folks are kind of making that same connection. So I'm curious, right? So there's the listening, the kind of understanding, the empathic journey of going down, kind of an understanding. We're talking about Blacks because it's Black History Month, but all employees, right? But so that's where we are. But then there's this kind of this opportunity to reach back and develop your employees. Again, Black employees in this case. How do you guys think about that? And Constance, I'm going to start with you, since Udemy is a learning organization, right? So you're you're responsible for this inside an organization that prides itself on giving knowledge to the world.
For sure, it's making the effort. It's caring. It's ensuring that your executive staff, your leaders, actually care and understand. We talked about this whole unlearning process. I'm going to take it back just a little bit. When I think about, I will speak about my own educational journey. So going through elementary and middle school and high school and even up to college, there was no mention of Juneteenth in my curriculum at all, ever. There was no mention of the fact that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and that whole song. Yeah, he was a murderer. So like, can we talk about the truths? Can we have a truth telling and an unlearning? So as we're going on through our personal journeys, I am still going through my own journey of liberating my mind and taking off the oppression that I've had from years of learning what wasn't true, right? So being able to have your executive team go through that same process, like really get them to understand not only where we are, but the things that we're missing. Like, yes, you were told lies just like I was, right? No, all Black people, don't walk around and insert stereotype here, right? Stop that. Let's stop. And let's unlearn, and let's think about what this means. And now that you have that understanding, and the reason that is so important, Guy, is before you can try to help another community, you have to understand the community. Mm-hmm. And if your understanding of me as a Black woman, as a Black person is gangster, thug, insert stereotype, whatever that is, then you're never going to get what it is I'm trying to talk to you about. You're not going to understand that because you can't see past the layers that have been put on your eyes for years and years and years and years. Right? So there's an unlearning that needs to happen personally and then professionally, right? So when I'm saying professional in this sense, I'm talking about the corporate level. So the corporate executives need to then understand what that looks like, break those, unlearn for themselves, and then be able to see, okay, this is why we're focusing efforts on the Black community right now. Guy, all of us were talking about the other day about a rising tide sinks all ships, and raises all ships, not sinks, raises all ships. And then the scenario was made, or the situation was brought up, that not all ships are even in the water. And that's just factual. That's factual information, right? So when we get to conversations around the executive team, helping them understand why we are focusing on the systemically marginalized populations, why we are focusing on the Black population, why we are focusing on Indigenous people, why we're focusing on these communities, is because that's what equity is about.
Yep.
Right. And so that's why we're having these conversations. And that's why we need to focus on specific communities, because these specific communities have been historically for decades, hundreds and eons, centuries, right, held back and not given the support that they needed to actually sustain and move forward. So the unlearning that happens. Go ahead, Guy.
No, I appreciate you putting that out there, because I mean, it's easy to get, kind of feel like in some cases, like, where special attention is being paid and you feel defensive about that, right? So, I think you putting that out there is like, this rising tide lifting all boats, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. It really is really important and really timely. And so we're almost out of time here, unfortunately, so I feel like I've been to school and to church, right? Kind of all in one session here. But I'm gonna let Tracy, because again, Tracy, you came from YPO and you're kind of at Bonds right now, focused on professional development. So I want to ask you this question, but in the meantime, I want the rest of you guys to think about kind of your takeaways, to the 5 ways to empower Black employees, right? The summary, we're going to make a list, hopefully at the end of this, at the end of Tracy's response here.
Yeah, I know we've been talking a lot about this at the organizational level, and I think sometimes people feel like they aren't empowered enough in their roles in their organizations to do something about what we see as the problem, right? And so I want to speak directly to anyone who is a manager or supervisor, leader who's on this webinar, and truly understand that you providing any type of support to help the success and growth of your Black employees does not take away from your own. Bottom line, one of my best leaders, and I always talk about this, white woman, she and I had a conversation one day, and she said, it is my job to support your journey, whether it means that you move up in this organization or move out. And if I don't have the opportunity for you here, who am I to hold you back so that you can ensure that you are growing in your own professional journey? She looked at me and she said, you have what it takes to do X, Y, and Z. I'm not going to hold you back from that. And that's the mark of a good leader. So if you have anyone who is a direct report, don't hold back from them. Be transparent, be honest about the opportunities that are in the organization. Who do they need to connect with? Because again, if we are talking about Black employees, they do not even know. A lot of times we don't even know who we need to network with within these organizations in order to understand what the opportunities are. And if you know and you're not telling them, that's on you as a leader. So if you have the knowledge, share the knowledge. Don't be ambiguous, be as transparent and be as clear as possible, because I promise you that their success will reflect fondly on you in the future, but be giving in that way. And if they provide the information that your employees are seeking, we all have an opportunity to do that in our respective roles as leaders within our organizations. And we should be proactive in taking those opportunities as much as possible so that we can start to turn the tide of this idea of Black employees not knowing what the game is. And I love what Renita said, if there's a game in the first place, we need to take a look at that organizationally. If y'all didn't see that in the chat, please go look at it, because there really shouldn't be one. So thank you for pointing that out, Renita. But until we get rid of it, the only way for us to do that is to ensure that we are providing the information. And so that's my challenge to anyone on this call. Freely share the information that you do have, so that employees feel that they're at least on the playing field, even if it's not level yet. At least they feel like that they're there, and they have some ways that they can navigate that they didn't have before.
Great, that's a great point. Now, I brought up the game analogy, and I realized I'm going to go back and look at game film, kind of here to see how I can improve my performance. But that being said, if we could wrap this up with, again, just, James Lowry, who was the first Black consultant at McKinsey, is an executive advisor for Valence. And he always asked me, this is great. All this stuff you're talking about is great, but what are you going to do on Monday morning, right? So I'd like to make a Monday morning list of things that people can leave here. We could have like, what, 5 days to kind of get all these things set up. But what is it that they can do when they get to the office on Monday morning to really help Black employees and help the organization really capitalize on the knowledge that these employees have? Anybody want to offer?
I think, and I'll just quickly, succinctly say this: level the learning budget. In the people space, we have hypo programs. We have, executives get money. Like there's money set aside. Level the learning budget and ensure that every employee has X dollars. And then, I probably would just add to that something else that you could do, like when I think about, Valence or bonds, have a list of places, right, that various communities can go to invest their learning budget. Because a lot of times, I know in my last organization, we had a learning budget, and a number of people didn't even touch the $1,000 because they didn't know what to do with it, right? So empower Black as well as everyone else with tools or resources or vendors that you would recommend or suggest that they can invest that money in, especially in the, in the realm of coaches, right? When I think about coaches and helping someone level up their career and more of their soft skills and their hard skills.
I would add, as a leader, if you have a team with Black talent or over, have some conversations on Monday. Look at the initiatives that you currently have, the projects you have going, see if they're engaged. And if you haven't even told them lately that, hey, I see potential, I want to support you. What are you interested in? How can we get you plugged in over here? But like asking those questions, because a lot of times you see them over there, but you're not actively doing anything. But have the conversation and understand their goals, what they're wanting to work on, how can you support it? And then to Kelah's point, let's then get you plugged into a training course. I'm going to allow you to have that time off to go take the training. So you got to be up in the middle of the night trying to do training and work. But just having that conversation on Monday, and not in a weird way. It's like, I was at I'm wondering, Mr. Black employee, what do you need? Like, no, generally, hey, I was listening to a webinar, and I'm curious, how can I be more supportive of you? What are you wanting to do? But just having some talks.
Well, I'm glad you didn't go all most deaf on us, right? Tracy, Constance.
No, go ahead.
So Renita touched on having the conversation, which is so important. I would ask you all as leaders as well to do an analysis on any extra work that your Black employees are doing right now. That would be what researchers call inclusion labor, meaning they're so great, we're going to give them this project, we're going to give them this, that they're probably not being compensated for, that is not showing up on their performance reviews as, how they contributed, et cetera. Please do an analysis, or at least begin one, so that you can understand what your Black employees might be engaged in outside of their regular roles and responsibilities that might be taking away from their opportunities to move up, because they're doing so much other work that some of those other goals that have been set for them might be at risk because you've asked them to engage in some of that extra labor that you're not asking other people to engage in. So yeah, if you have some rock stars on your team, it means they're rock stars because they're probably doing a lot of extra stuff that they feel is needed in order to be seen, in order to be identified as someone who is a leader, but in actuality, it might be holding them back.
Yep, Constance, you get the last word.
Couple of gems. So for those that have to jump, thank you so much. This is being recorded, so no worries, you can always come back later. Couple of thoughts. Don't withdraw without setting up an account. What does that mean? You can't go up to a Wells Fargo ATM if you don't have an account there, can you? Will you be able to take money out? Likely not. So Renita, to your point, having that conversation to support is different from having the conversation because you want me to be your resource, your educational resource for all the learnings about Black people. Don't do that, please. Starting with equity, we spoke about that. Understand what's currently going on at your organization, take an assessment, analyze the data. Hopefully you have an analytics team or someone that's actually trained to go through and analyze that data. So analyze it and then take action. Unlearning required. All of us need to go through and unlearn what we have learned or relearn or truth seek, right? To understand some of the things, like, let's be clear, there are books right now being banned, critical race theory being banned. And there are things that are being banned to make sure that we don't know the truth. Please go and find the truth, or question your sense of normalcy, or question the truth that you currently have now. And then the last one is minority. Please don't refer to Black people or any systemically marginalized group as minority. It makes me cringe, and here's why. First of all, it's factually incorrect. 80% of the world population right now is made up of Black, brown, Asian, and indigenous folks. So let's just be let's be clear about it and be factual. I am not a minority, so don't refer to me as such unless you're talking about, just don't, period. I won't even go into that. Just don't refer to me as such. So those are my gems. Guy, thank you so much. Valence, I really have appreciated being here. Renita, Kelah, this has been an amazing session. Thank you so much for having me.
No, fantastic, you guys. And check out All Voices. Also check out Valence, Bonds, Udemy. Thank you guys so much for being a client and support. And Christina, hopefully you can shorten the session to just 1 hour. You can kind of like play it at 1.1 speed. Thank you guys.
Thanks,
Thank you guys.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.